Well, hi everybody, and today is just a quick update for International Women's Day. Well, hi everyone, this is DearMamaSal, and I'm out and about. I'm off to go and have my sleep apnea machine checkup. I guess that's what they call it. I'm not 100% sure. I'll let you know when I've done it. But today is the Day of the Woman, and it used to be called International Women's Day, and I don't know really quite what it's called now, but who cares? You understand what I'm talking about. And I was thinking that maybe this is the time for me to give you some feedback about how things have changed in my lifetime. And I say that because I was a bit of a trailblazer. I know you'd be surprised to hear that, but I was a bit of a trailblazer in my day. I was, as some of you know, not allowed to go to university because apparently that's where my mummy thought they trained communism. Yeah, right. And I trained, of all things, to become a secretary because she told me you'd always have a job if you had that skill. Yeah, well, not necessarily so, Mummy, but I forgive you. So what I wanted to explain was that that was a very difficult job for me because, you know, basically secretaries in those days were paid to be quiet and to obey their bosses. Well, you know, it's me. And for those of you who've known me quite a long time, I always have an opinion. Doesn't have to be right, but I have an opinion and I'm entitled to it. I've always been very strong on that. And so I got into a lot of trouble as a secretary. But I had a couple of really smart bosses who, in their day, worked out that they could play a lot of golf because they didn't have to worry Sal was running the show, which of course I was, whether they liked it or not. And I literally would, you know, read a piece of correspondence and answer it, and then just, you know, let my boss sign it, because I knew what was going on. And I knew the situation. Well, do you think my boss really loved it? You know, I mean, occasionally, you know, he'd have a little bit of an issue with my view on something or my wording or whatever. But basically, I would say if I had one letter a day returned to me for a correction, it was a lot. So imagine how much he wanted to hold on to me. In fact, I can remember at one stage, somebody offered to promote me, and my boss said, no, pay her more, don't move her. Because at the moment she's too valuable to us. It was really quite funny. But I was thinking in terms of the fact that I went on from being a secretary to being a trainee sales representative, which of course much more suitable for my mentality and my big mouth. I did very well, very quickly. I was in the advertising business, originally in publishing. But you know, it was unheard of in those days for, well, almost unheard of, for women to have any power positions. And within 18 months, I was basically running 30 consumer magazines in 16 languages and a budget in the millions, which we're talking now 50 years ago, and you can imagine what that would have been worth today. So how much have things changed? Well, I remember that I was paid less than my male employees. In other words, I was in charge of male employees who earned more than I did. And when I queried that and said, you know, could you explain to me why that is so, they actually told me it was because, you know, he was married or whatever. And I'd say, oh, that's the trick, is it? I need to be married. Well, not necessarily. And I said, oh, so if I got married, you still wouldn't pay me as much. So I'm thinking, how much have things changed? I'm thinking about Hollywood at the moment, and I don't think that's changed a whole lot. I still think women get paid less than men, and I'm not sure why. Because you could justify it back 50 years ago that men were the breadwinners, but that's not true today. In most cases, they are at, I would say, to a large extent, they are equal breadwinners. So why, as we're hearing, why should women earn less? So I was thinking that, you know, in 50 years, it hasn't changed a whole lot. It's getting better. Now, the one thing I remember hearing when I first came to North America was about the glass ceiling. And I remember saying, what's that? And they said, you know, that's where women get held back because they're women. I said, no, women don't get held back because they're women. Women get held back because they can't do a job better than a man. And in the old Boys Act, you know, old boys school, whatever they call it, you know, they would prefer to deal with men because men think logically. Women are emotional to a large extent. And I'm not saying in all cases, but, you know, basically men really struggle with, you know, there's a reason why they wrote the book Men Are From Mars and Women From Venus, because we think very differently. So I look at it, you know, 50 years later, and I go, wow. I can remember 50 years ago that the reason I got the jobs I did was because they knew they needed to give it to me, otherwise the competition would take me. I have to be quite honest about that. I was so, you know, I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I was so well respected in the industry that they knew if they didn't promote me that somebody else would offer me a job. Now, they also knew that I wouldn't go to the competition. It was just a social thing I had. It was a personal creed. I would never go to the competition, but, you know, I could go within the industry, but not to the competition. And so they did at one point not pay me very well. I realized I was bringing them in those days, $1 million a month. And I was getting paid peanuts. And I sort of talked about it, and I was told, you know, that nothing was going to change, really. I said, okay. And so what I started to do was to go to some of the interviews that people were offering me. And I did. I went to an interview, and I had an interview with an advertising agency. And they offered me the job of being the account manager for a I'm trying to think what the equivalent would be. Okay, in Canada, for the equivalent of London Drugs, and I guess in the States, the equivalent of Rite Aid, I think it's called. That sort of thing, okay? Which was a big job. And they offered me twice as much salary. And a really nice company car. And very nice expense account. So I just resigned, and my boss said to me, why let's discuss this. I said, no, we already went through this. We don't need to discuss it anymore. I'm off. You know, I'm not gonna beg or you know, you've already told me a long time ago that you couldn't, you know, justify paying me anymore, so I'm out of here. So he said, no, not so fast. I said, yeah, I'm out of here. So I left. Big risk. But I must say that I'm very proud of the fact that even though I left, my clients from that job still phoned me whenever they had a problem. And I would listen to the problem, and if I thought their situation was unfair, I would pick up the phone and phone down to the big bosses and go, what are you doing with George? And they go, Sal, you don't work here anymore. And I go, yeah, I know that, but my name is on his contract. And they know that. And as long as that contract has my name on it, I will continue to be involved. When the contract is rewritten, I'm good. But at the moment, that's the contract I wrote. So I don't like that you're messing with him. And guess what? They fixed it. And I had a reputation for being that sort of person. I think they call it ballsy today. But here's the other thing. In those days, you had to be able to drink really well. I'm not joking. I would say 50% of all business was done over a lunch table or a dinner table. Or in a bar. I mean, it's scary. So you had to be able to drink very well, because not only had you gone to lunch, then you had to go for drinks after work, and then maybe to dinner, and then you had to drive home. Because in those days, it wasn't the same as it is today. And I don't mind telling you, that bit scares me to even think about today, how many times I drove home drunk. The other thing was, everybody presumed that you slept your way up to the positions that I had. Because, that hasn't changed either. Which, of course, wasn't true. But, let people think what they want to think. I had people try to blackmail me. I had people, horror stories, really. But it doesn't really matter. The point is that it was very different. And I look at it now and I go, wow. I learned a lot in those days, the hard way. I learned a lot about management, and I learned a lot about people, and I learned a lot about everything. So 50 years later, what do I think? I think that I was so lucky.